Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Hashtag IGD Talks. My name is Raquel Simpson, and I will be your host for today. Just to introduce myself, I'm a practical nursing student, and I hold a master's in emergency management. I have recently embarked upon this wonderful journey of gerontological nursing. In this podcast series, I will be introducing a number of special guests who will provide invaluable insight in dementia care, dementia research, education, and training. Let's get started. Enjoy the show. Okay, welcome everyone to the 5th episode of our podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Michelle Bliss. So Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Raquel.
I'm just going to have you introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay, well thanks, and thanks for having me. My name is Michelle Bliss, and I'm the GPA Clinical Education Specialist here at AGE. I'm a registered nurse by background with, pridefully, over 30 years of experience in dementia care.
That's awesome.
Primarily in the long-term care sector with some behavioral consultation and education through the role of a PRC here in Ontario. And my passion and interest has always been in coaching and supporting people, staff, students, and family members to be the best they can be when caring for persons living with dementia.
Right. So good. This is exciting because you have a wealth of knowledge and we're hoping to tap into that. And I'm positive this is going to be amazing and you're going to definitely give us lots of food for thought.
Thanks for the vote of confidence.
So I would like to start off just by asking you a bit about the role that you played when delivering the GPA component of the GSD workshop that took place, I think about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, so it was April 8th, 2016, I believe, and it was an innovative way to deliver some of the GPA content that could really integrate and apply the students' learning from their experience taking the GPA e-learning online modules. We do know that from research, people have still expressed a desire to have some practical application to reinforce their learning in practical experiences and stories, and to even try the hands-on. So what we did was approach our roster of master coaches and certified coaches. Just to be efficient, we looked logistically, the people who were close to Hamilton, who could come and help us out that day and were interested. And actually, we got great response right away from our seasoned master coaches primarily. So those are people who have been with the GPA, coaching GPA, several of them since its inception in 2004. Who, graciously came forward, very excited for the opportunity to work with students. Because we all firmly believe that this is really where the hope is. This is where the hope lies in helping students start off their careers with the knowledge they need to be successful and feel successful. So I recruited lots of coaches. I think we ended up with 9 master coaches, 7 of which were master coaches, and 2 were GPA certified coaches. So the 9 coaches agreed to be present that day and assist in a novel way of facilitation. Our traditional model of GPA Basics, the education session, is with a smaller group, team-based learning, facilitated by coaches face-to-face in a classroom type session. And the benefit of that is that the students, the participants, can weave in their experiences, their stories, and their learning, and the coach facilitates by carrying those examples throughout the day and building on that learning through the curriculum. So what we were looking at for the Geriatric Skills Day was how can we facilitate in an innovative and exciting way to the multidisciplinary students present key GPA content that can reinforce their learning and then make it make sense for them, or make it be meaningful for them, recognizing that they may or may not be going into dementia care per se, But that's actually one of our long-time messages. Anybody who works in the geriatric field, and in my experience with geriatric nursing and working with students, is you'll find many of them expect that they're going to go into a field and might say, well, I don't really need this. This has got nothing to do with me. I'm going to go into ER. I'm going to go into, unless you're going into pediatrics or obstetrics.
Right.
Every single student at some point, especially in nursing or PSW students, in the healthcare field, you're going to encounter older persons.
For
you're going to
sure.
encounter people aging and having to interact with people who are aging and may present with some cognitive changes.
Right.
So we want to support them right from the beginning to understand that, no, this is critically important information, and it's going to build your confidence. It's going to build your abilities to interact with older people in such a way that you can, do the clinical assessments that you need, so you can carry forward with your clinical protocols. But the GPA is the meat and potatoes that allows you to develop a rapport, to come close to them,
right,
to develop their trust such that you can do the interactions that your clinical guidelines or your school of practice would ask you to do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
So bringing it back to what we did that day, we thought, well, let's do something completely different and in a really large group.
Mm-hmm.
So I will be honest, I don't recall how many students were in the auditorium that day.
Okay.
But let's just say it was certainly a lot larger than any GPA session we would ever run, nor does our model fit. So we knew we had to do something innovative, creative. And my goal also, with students especially, is to make it such that they're not bored or wanting to poke their eyes out with their pens because they're thinking, I know this, or this doesn't have to do with me. So let's try to make it fun. So we quickly did a whip in the group. Should I go through the content and kind of let you know what we exposed them to win them over?
Yeah, let's hear what your strategy was and how you engaged students.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and again, it was a strategy, and what I just said, we did want to win them over. I wanted to have them on board and understand that this applies to everyone. We do a quick whip of the room, and I had my master coaches and certified coaches help facilitate by scribing words onto flip chart paper, and this is part of the core curriculum in GPA Basics. But just a shout out in the room, tell me, what are the qualities of a compassionate dementia care worker? Who do you need to be? What do you need to do to be successful?
Right.
So in this, and I'm seasoned in prompting people to shout out words such as patience, kindness, understanding, knowledge, self-awareness, resilience, creativity, flexibility. So we fill up a flip chart page with those words and say, this is you, this can be you. And moving forward, you need to recognize that you need to bring all those. You need to bring your A game when working in the field of elder care and with people with dementia. But that's what makes it so wonderful too.
Right.
It's never the same thing twice. And we wanted to get them excited about it, that if you bring these skills with you, you can be successful.
For sure.
So, and then next we went through just a couple of the key components, key content from GPA, including behavioral escalation scale, helping them recognize that when a person is becoming upset, there's an ebb and flow to it. And our goal is to recognize early on, well, number one, do the things that can avoid triggering the individual.
Right.
Provide them with a sense of safety, comfort, security, and familiarity so that the individual never does have to become upset. But in the case or in the event that they do begin to feel upset, through GPA and the GPA curriculum, we help people understand those early subtle cues to recognize and say, hey, okay, something I'm doing could be contributing.
Right.
Let me just step back. And we also in the curriculum encourage them how to step back. What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And it could just be a momentary stop, as in the stop and go. And we brought them through that practical experience afterwards. So we point that out so that we will build it in an experiential exercise afterwards. And then we went through some basic principles of successful verbal redirection.
Okay.
Successful verbal redirection.
So elaborate on that.
So how to respond to someone when there's repeated questions, or they're seeking an item that can't be found, or a person who possibly has passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So those repetitive questions often can be demoralizing for staff and students. You become fearful and anxious. I don't know what to say. I
Right.
don't know what the facts are. I don't know where this person is, or I don't have time to go looking for their purse every half hour. So there's actually step-by-step techniques that was adapted from Suter et al. In our GPA curriculum, which really says that first off, validate them, let them know you hear them, I'm with you. And we take them through just a few examples of that. And again, we invite them to practice later in a practical application. So we're still in a large group activity here. We kept it moving quickly to try to keep their attention and make sure it made sense to them.
Right.
And to keep them involved. I knew I had a few allies in the audience as well, or I'd say in the learning
That always
group,
helps. That
that
helps.
I could call upon them by name in case I was hearing crickets from the crowd.
Right.
But it worked out pretty well, and I'm not sure if you can pick up that I have a bit of energy, so I tried to share some of that energy and
Sure.
keep people engaged for that. So then we stood up and we did some of the physical techniques. We showed quick video reviews. So it was multimodal. We used video clips, whiteboard animations, a bit of didactic, quick PowerPoint, but then gathering the words on the flip chart. Then we had the 9-8, I was the 9th, 8 master coaches stationed throughout the room. So that then from the stage, it was actually a stage, I was able to guide them through some of the basic hand movements for some physical techniques.
Okay.
Including grasp release, how to respond if somebody has grasped you in such a way that it's primarily a neurological reflex response, the grasp reflex, helping them understand that this person isn't doing this with intent to harm.
Right.
They're not doing it because they're, as the wording would call it, aggressive or agitated.
Right.
This is a human being who has a neurological response, and we have a very gentle way to release from that. So I would coach from the stage, and then certified coaches and master coaches throughout the room would eyeball and do minor corrections just on the spot. And likewise, we stood from where they were at their tables and went through responses to strikes and kicks.
Right.
And then we reviewed on video the individual and team gentle redirection techniques.
Okay.
They would have seen this before in the e-learning, but then our next step was to break them down into smaller groups. In planning this day, we determined there was a certain amount that could be done in a large group with the coach support. It was very resource intensive. And again, these coaches and master coaches volunteered their time, which is really exciting to think that they were all so invested in supporting this project and supporting the students.
Absolutely.
Learning. So once we went over the redirection techniques, then we broke into smaller groups. We had the logistics, we had the color-coded groups. And broken into, I think ideally we were looking for 4 groups of 20.
Okay.
We're probably a bit smaller than that. I'm still not clear on the numbers, but each coach partner pair went to a different area of the hospital and worked in small groups, which is more akin to what the traditional model of GPA is.
Right.
And in that space, they took the learners through a modified personal space exercise. So that's where they reinforce that actual feeling, what it's like to be so close in someone's personal space and you're feeling anxious.
Right.
And if you're not feeling anxious, you recognize your partner's feeling anxious.
Right.
And we thought it was very important for them to experience that, because as in our GPA learning, once we get all participants to a point where feeling pretty anxious and not comfortable with what's going on, then we invite them to step back.
Okay.
And usually we hear a cumulative
a sigh of relief.
Sigh of relief.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we reinforced them that this is one of your most critical techniques that you can apply at any given time. It's referred to as the stop and go, just stopping what you're doing, backing off, and it doesn't have to take 5 minutes, and you don't necessarily have to regroup. That you can just stop what you're doing, focus on the person, say their name, acknowledge they're upset, and proceed.
Right.
With whatever your plan is, that's your person-centered, knowing what you do know about the person.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the capacity of the students to apply some of these techniques and these physical maneuvers.
Well, I have to say that the purpose of the day was to get through practice and observation. I feel that in discussing with some of the coaches afterwards, because they're students, there is not a lot of unlearning that needs to take place.
Right.
Quite often when we do GPA in the care environment, in the long-term care sector is primarily where I did a lot of GPA, and you had to correct hands-on placement for certain techniques because we had done it a certain way for so many years, namely the redirection technique. So actually I found in my group of students, they picked it up very quickly and were able to do the hands-on and hand movements because they didn't have to unlearn any other movements,
right.
if that makes sense. This was new to them.
Right.
And which was really great because the whole idea of the day was not so much to focus on the physical techniques, but aligning it with Bandura's theory of self-efficacy is ensuring that the students feel confident that, hey, if stuff does go awry or if things change, A, I'm going to recognize it, and B, I'm going to know what to do about it. And then that better enables them to modulate their own emotional response in a situation that normally they might have felt frightened or anxious or that they couldn't handle
right.
it. Or possibly they would have responded in their own possibly seemingly aggressive manner because
right.
they wanted to control the situation. So that's the whole goal, was to help them understand how to approach people, how to step back, and then ultimately at the end of the day there are physical techniques that you can use.
Right.
And that enables them a sense of confidence going into the field. And as far as the application of the big picture,
right.
at the end of the day, we allowed them 20 minutes, broke into small groups, very small groups, like 4 or 5, and provided them with scenarios, so practice scenarios that they may encounter. We tried to pick a variety of care settings,
right.
and including, you're in a clinic and you have to take vitals. But you know the person has had a history of really not being willing to get those vitals taken. And you come into the room, but they're wearing a Bass Pro Shop hat and a camouflage jacket. So to us, that seems like a slam dunk. You're going to start chatting about, hunting or fishing, possibly. This is what we were looking for.
Yeah.
So we broke the groups up, and I know in mine, it was fun, and they were marvelous. They applied the communication techniques and the stop and go in the personal space, all of the really non-hands-on GPA therapeutic approaches in such a way that I just felt, even in that little half-day session, that these students were just that much further set up for success when they get out there in their clinical practice. So we had given them, learning from previous GPA sessions and GPA coach workshops, I've found it's better to provide them with the information they need. So we had given them a list of principles and strategies to remember, including step-by-step communication techniques. So introduce yourself, say the person's name, speak clearly, use simple words, speak at eye level, convey positive, non-threatening body language, and the list goes on. So by having that in front of them, we gave them a few minutes to work out each scenario and what they would do. And really what they came back with was marvelous. And I felt that, at least in the group that I observed with my co-coaches, that they really nailed it and were able to apply the techniques. And I mean, we can't give GPA all of the credit. We do know that many of these people coming forward have all those skills. They have innate ability, and they're humanistic interactions.
Absolutely.
But sometimes we need GPA to validate why what they're doing works, or to possibly show them a different way of doing things and just to reinforce the best practices.
So what were some of the lessons learned, do you feel, from your perspective and the perspective of the master coaches, in terms of trying a new innovative way of delivering this GPA material?
Oh, that's a really good question. Lessons learned. You do have to keep it fun. You do have to. My understanding from the focus groups too, there was you think of all the great comments and this was great, I love this, it's good for everybody. And then, there may have been a couple not sure this applied to me, I don't know when I'll ever use it. And I think as educators, we have to keep that in mind. Is sometimes you're facilitating and you're working with groups of people who may not be present considering that this will ever apply to them.
Right.
And I'm trying to say this in a tactful way. The idea is most practitioners are going to, at some point in time, interact with older adults.
Mm-hmm.
And even, I have had physicians, I've had GPs attend the GPA full day session.
Right.
And at the end of it have told me this was really helpful, because GPA and the techniques involved are the vehicle by which you can interact with that human being to do your practice,
mm-hmm.
to do your clinical assessment, to do your care strategies. So I think it's a grounding knowledge base.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, what I learned moving forward is how can we structure things in such a way that it's interesting, informative, and applicable to all people.
Okay, yeah. That's really, really interesting. I think, would you elaborate a bit more, and this is something that you kind of talked about, I believe you even used this word, but this whole conversation about GPA being a non-pharmacological intervention and the role that it can play in the clinical setting, as opposed to if somebody's behavior is quote unquote aggressive, or the patient is agitated and the healthcare provider quickly going towards a pharmacological intervention, as opposed to trying to use some of the techniques that you had made mention of that GPA does provide or does train people. Can you maybe add your voice to this conversation around non-pharmacological interventions?
That's our ultimate goal, is to implement non-pharmacological interventions as much as possible. And in my years of the work that I've done, we've made great strides. We really have made great strides as far as people understanding we need to try multiple options and not just make assumptions about the behavior. So GPA aligns with several other complementary education programs through which healthcare teams and clinicians can have the ability to just step back and say, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
What is the change? What is the behavior? And address what's going on. We may be on the receiving end, or care providers may be on the receiving end of response and of a behavior that is, frankly, violent in nature, mm-hmm. or it can be very aggressive. And we first aim to look at that behavior, understand the context, understand the situation, the triggers. Are there avoidable triggers? Are there underlying conditions that could be treated, or situations such as pain that could be addressed, and addressing the whole person holistically in the approaches. So I may be going off here non-pharmacologic because it's a big concept. I do have great faith in I get to cross Canada. It's such a privilege to cross Canada and facilitate coach workshops and hear the exciting things that people are doing and the innovative strategies that are out there to reduce the use of unnecessary psychotropics. Keeping in mind that if there's risks, the risk has to be addressed. But I do know that clinicians and practitioners are doing their best to address physical responsive behaviors in such a way that they keep the individual safe and the staff safe. So GPA combines approaches. It's the humanistic interaction,
okay.
and it's the communication, the approach. I recognize that what I'm doing right now is not working, so maybe I need to stop what I'm doing, take a deep breath, and if I have the knowledge of that person, if I'm in such a rush because the bells are ringing, and again, my head goes to long-term care, and apologies to people who aren't the long-term care sector, because I know it is applicable across many sectors, but that is my experience, and I know sometimes, and I truly believe there's really well-meaning, hard-working people out there that sometimes, or many times, have to go with a pace that's not comfortable for them with the system. So sometimes we just need to step back, and I include myself in this in my previous practice where I've had to just stop, take a deep breath, wash away whatever current emotions were causing my face to be crumpled and my teeth to be grit, and to just remember this is a human being.
Right.
Although I have a task to complete.
Yep.
This is a human being, and lucky me, I'm human too.
Right.
So that gives us a bridge right away that I have to be able to at least communicate on any level with this person, even if it is the gentle eyes or a little smile or a gentle touch or getting the heck out of their space.
Sure.
That's often what they need to.
Sure.
I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, I think you have. You're talking a bit about some of the non-pharmacological techniques that GPA uses in a clinical setting, and maybe that is not you might want to consider that as a frontline option, as opposed to necessarily thinking, okay, this person's aggressive. We need to give them some sort of medication to calm them down. There might be other strategies that can be applied. To de-escalate.
Going back to our traditional model of GPA as well, is that it's implemented into an organization. It's implemented in a team-based setting with team-based discussions about the persons that are currently in the care setting or that they've had that they can learn from. And what that does too for impact is if everybody's on the same page.
Right.
It's critically important. And one thing, and I'm going back to where the students are coming from, because they may learn it in the student environment. They're all going to go fan out and work in different places.
Very true.
And hopefully GPA then has given them the confidence to trust their spidey sense. Quite often, I say spidey sense, quite often students will tell us profound testimonials and stories about learning things with their, slow, gentle, theoretical principles, and going into the workplace and having seasoned workers tell them, well, that's great, but this is the real world. I experienced that long ago, and I hope in the clinical setting that we've certainly improved in that area. But students often recognize that something doesn't feel right to them, that there has to be a better way to do this. And by providing GPA in the student setting as an entry to practice education, not only will they go out with some knowledge around what those experiences mean, but hopefully it gives them more confidence to stand up, for lack of a better way, way of describing it. Because quite often, I remember myself, I wasn't a timid student, but I wasn't as assertive as I am now. And I remember witnessing things, and I really was careful about making a statement about not agreeing with something, or because it's just the culture. Yeah. It's the culture. So we want to empower, enable, equip all care workers if possible, but certainly students to move forward and, stealing the quote, be the change that they want to see. Because if they trust their spidey sense and they say, hey guys, isn't there a better way to do this? And then, I learned this in GPA, what do you think? Or let me try. I think we can really evoke change in the system.
That's great. That's great, Michelle.
And that concludes episode 5 of #IGD Talks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Join us for episode 6 with Barb McCoy, a registered nurse with over 45 years of experience in geriatric care, specifically in managing care for persons living with dementia. Don't miss out on our chat with Barb.